Welcome to the Explainer. Do you know that feeling when you've got a plan, a foolproof plan, and then it just completely blows up in your face? Well, today we're digging into a sermon that makes a pretty bold claim that most of us are doing that with our entire lives. It all boils down to one simple question, really. Are we living for the here and now, or for what actually lasts?
So the sermon starts out with this big idea that most of our plans fail for just one reason. And to get us on board, the speaker uses a classic 80s movie as an example. The whole point is, if you don't start by thinking about the end result, you're pretty much setting yourself up for a total disaster.
And that movie? Yep, it's Ferris Bueller's Day Off. The plan seems simple, right? 3 friends, a priceless Ferrari they've, let's say, borrowed, and an epic joyride through Chicago. The goal is to get it back before anyone's the wiser. But oh boy, they forget to think through one very, very important detail.
Their so-called fix is where it all goes spectacularly wrong. They've put, 174 miles on the car, and their genius idea is to just run the odometer in reverse. But that's not how physics works, is it? Instead of erasing the miles, the car ends up flying backwards into a ravine. Total chaos. And the sermon says, this right here is the perfect metaphor for a life that's just focused on the moment, with zero thought about the final destination. It is a textbook example of failing to begin with the end in mind.
So that huge Ferrari-sized mess, that's the springboard the sermon uses to jump into its main point from the Bible. The argument is that Jesus once ran into this huge crowd of people who were making the exact same mistake as Ferris. They were completely locked in on what was right in front of them and totally missing the bigger picture.
See, according to the sermon, this crowd was following Jesus for a pretty simple reason. He had just performed a miracle, feeding 5,000 of them with just a couple of loaves and fish. So, yeah, their bellies were full and they were basically hoping for a round 2. But Jesus sees this and uses it as a teaching moment. He challenges them to look beyond their physical hunger and think about a much, much deeper kind of hunger.
And this right here sets up the core contrast of the whole talk. On one side, you've got perishable food. This is all the stuff that takes up our day-to-day brain space, right? Our jobs, our paychecks, what's for dinner, all those temporary things. But then, on the other side, there's eternal food. And that is all about orienting your entire life around something bigger, something that lasts. Now, the speaker makes it super clear. This isn't about quitting your job and living in a cave. It's about changing why you work. It's about working not just for the money, but for a purpose that, from this perspective, honors God.
Okay, so what is this eternal food he's talking about? Well, this is where the sermon really dives into Jesus' answer. And let me tell you, it was a claim so bold, so radical, that it was seriously controversial for the people who first heard it. Pastor Myers really breaks this down for us. For the crowd listening back then, this statement was absolutely electric. Why? Because when they heard bread from heaven, their minds immediately went to one place, the story of their ancestors being fed by that miraculous manna in the desert. And Jesus knew that. He was making that connection on purpose.
But here's the twist, and this is the crucial difference the sermon points out. That manna, it was a temporary fix. You had to gather it every single day, and everyone who ate it, well, they still eventually died. Jesus, on the other hand, presents himself as the permanent solution, a one-and-done deal that offers something much bigger, eternal life.
Now, the sermon really hammers this point home. The specific words Jesus uses here, I am, are absolutely critical. For his Jewish listeners, that phrase would have been a massive red flag. It's a direct echo of how God revealed his own name to Moses way back in the book of Exodus. So when Jesus says, I am the bread of life, he's not just offering you something to eat. No, the argument is he's making a direct, unmistakable claim to actually be God.
And this is just the beginning. According to the sermon, this is actually the first of 7 really powerful I am statements you find in the Gospel of John. Each one is like another piece of the puzzle, revealing a different aspect of his identity and building this big, cumulative case for his divinity.
But wait, there's more. Just as the crowd is trying to wrap their heads around this huge claim of being God, the sermon points out that Jesus completely raises the stakes. He throws out a second claim about who he is, and this one was, if you can believe it, even more shocking.
Okay, so this language, it was super offensive back then, and the sermon totally gets it. It sounds pretty bizarre to us today too. But the argument is that you're not supposed to take it literally. It's a metaphor, a deliberately shocking one, designed to force everyone listening to face another essential truth about him. Here's the logic the sermon lays out. These 2 claims are meant to work together, like 2 sides of the same coin. While all those I am statements point to him being divine, this really intense talk about flesh and blood is there to make sure you accept his full humanity.
He wasn't just some ghost or divine spirit. He was a real, walking, talking, physical person.
And this all leads us to a central concept in Christian theology called Christology, which is basically the study of Christ's nature. And according to the sermon, this dual identity is totally non-negotiable. His humanity means he can represent people, he can stand in their place, but his divinity is what gives him the power to actually offer a real solution. In this view, you can't have one without the other. They're both essential.
So you see how the sermon builds its case, right? It goes step by step. And what we find is that orienting your life for what matters most isn't some vague, feel-good idea. It's actually being presented as a very, very specific belief.
And this brings us to the sermon's big conclusion. That dual nature, being fully God and fully man, that is the bread of life. The argument is that truly accepting this whole package, this complete picture, is what it means to eat the bread and find that lasting satisfaction he's promising. This is the ultimate answer to that search for eternal food.
And just like that, the whole argument swings right back around to us, right here, right now. The sermon wraps up by asking a really practical question. It basically leaves the audience and us to think about what perishable food is eating up our time and attention. You know, the daily distractions, the temporary worries, all the stuff that might be keeping us from focusing on the real end goal.